Hey everybody, today we're going to be doing another topic video. I thought I would ask you guys what are some of your favorite sequels of all time, and I thought I would react to it. Obviously, those of you who watch me regularly know I'm making my way through the Star Wars trilogy, and after I saw Empire Strikes Back, it got me thinking about sequels, the nature of sequels, especially in Hollywood, but all kinds of sequels. And I realized that Empire, just in a mainstream sense, is one of the best sequels I think maybe ever made. And it's really hard to write a sequel. It's hard to be fresh, it's hard to be surprising, it's hard to meet expectations of an original film. So yeah, anyway, I just kind of wanted to get your input. But before we get into that, of course, I will plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist, I do commission portraits, and I also sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. All right. T2 is the perfect example and the greatest action movie ever made. All the action serves a unique purpose and carries a weight rather than just occurring for the sake of spectacle. It's also the perfect example of why practical effects will always be superior to CGI when it comes to big action set pieces. The limited amount of CGI that was used for the T-1000 is still holds up today. And I kind of disagree about the T-1000. Even when I was a kid and I saw that, I felt that, it really took me out of it, and I didn't particularly care for the effects of that. But I know I'm in the minority on that. But everything else you say, I completely agree with you on this. When it comes to James Cameron, he's somebody that I admire, absolutely. I enjoy his films, but he's not somebody that I necessarily connect to, and I don't consider him somebody who makes movies that are really kind of gritty and intense in that way. But for me, T2 is that film. To me, it has all of those elements that I've always wanted, from James Cameron, like especially in the original Terminator. I mean, it's a fine film, but I don't know, it's for me, it's not particularly memorable. And you look at Sarah Connor in particular, and it's like, that is an amazing leap, just in terms of her character motivations, but yet it fully makes sense. And I love it. I think it was really, really bold what they decided to do here. They really went for dark. And you're right, everything does have a unique purpose, and it's not just for the sake of a spectacle, and it so easily could have been, because sequels always feel that need to kind of meet a certain expectation. But yeah, for me, I think most of all, it's, there's a lot of emotional things going on in that film, but the Sarah Connor story, I felt myself really connect to, and she made such a transformation, going from this, more diminutive waitress who's, more kind of a typical damsel, and now suddenly she's this beaten down, shell-shocked woman, who's been through horrors, and she knows what's about to happen. And so seeing her in that frazzled, really hysterical state, but not really, I think is just fantastic. I think that it was a brilliant direction to go in, and props to the actress, props to them for willing to go that way. That is a film I would love to revisit. It's funny, I think I've only seen the original Terminator, and honestly, any other ones maybe one time, but Terminator 2 is one that is just so memorable, and there's so many scenes in it that are amazing that, yeah, I mean, it completely stands out, and it is the thing I think that fully holds the franchise together, very similar to Empire. Okay, so this is one of my big hot movie takes, but Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is better than Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it's one of the best action movies ever made. While Raiders succeeds in modernizing 1930s adventure serials, Temple of Doom brilliantly satirizes the racism and misogyny inherent in them. Raiders subverts the genre expectations with characters like Marion and Sala being portrayed as competent, heroic sidekicks. Temple throws the absurdity of the real genre in our face with characters like Willie and set pieces like the dinner scene, while still making it a brilliant action movie that's a wild ride to follow. Also, just love everything that Spielberg and Lucas did to make it a quasi-horror movie where you really see how evil the villains are, and John Williams' chanting cult theme may just be my favorite thing he ever did. Wow, that is very interesting and a really good write-up, actually. I can agree with you on certain things. I do agree with you that, I do like it when people are bold, and I like when people take risks. And especially with the sequel, it's very nice when you're willing to really take a departure from the original film. And that's a very hard thing to do at times, but they really did it. And they did go absolutely dark. They went full on 80s. They went fully for like the gross out, for the creepy crawly sequences. And yeah, like the heart sequence, stuff like that is definitely, I think, some of the darkest that Spielberg ever got when it came to making, movies like this, especially, summer movies, kids movies. And I appreciated him for that. I don't know if I agree with you when it comes to kind of like the satirizing of like the serials and everything. I personally just think it was way better in the original film. I'm not a fan of Temple of Doom really at all, and it's, like I said, I can admire the darkness of it, but I just don't feel like it fully comes to fruition. And even the idea here, what you're talking about of kind of like satirizing the misogyny or satirizing the racism. And maybe some people do believe that, and I know other people are maybe more offended by the racism in that film. To me, what was so interesting about Raiders is taking that serialized stuff, but then kind of making it fresher, making it more interesting, kind of subverting those expectations just a little bit so that the characters are very likable. And the story, for the most part, is very cohesive. In this film, it's very hard for me to connect to the characters. It's very hard for me to connect to the damsel in this film. Yes, the misogyny is, you know, that's kind of a joke, or that's, you know, she's the butt of the joke in that sense. But it's like, at a certain point, she's just so insufferable that I'm just disconnected from it. The only character I really like in the whole film is Short Round. But yeah, there's just a lot of muddled elements in the film. Any sort of satirizing in it, I just don't think has the same wit or cohesion. But that's just a personal opinion. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan is epic. It's Moby Dick in space, and it leaps far beyond the original. A beautiful film that gets me every single time. Not only is it the peak of Trek, but it saved the franchise and made the way to Star Trek Next Generations and everything afterward. Yeah. And I guess for the most part, a lot of these movies do depend on their sequels. That is the reason why these franchises were able to keep going. And in the case of Star Trek, that's totally true. Wrath of Khan was really, really important in carrying that franchise forward. And yeah, I mean, obviously the first film, you know, some people really like it. Some people do consider it to be really cerebral and interesting. Personally, I think it's very thinly sketched, very pretentious, and like, you know, it's going for kind of cerebral sci-fi, but it's failing miserably in my opinion. And it is the ultimate cure for insomnia. I'm telling you, I say that to everybody. You need a cure, just look for that film, find it in a Walmart bin and watch it. You'll go to sleep. It is sad because the Jerry Goldsmith score is phenomenal. I think the, just in terms of the direction, obviously Robert Wise did it, so the direction is amazing, just aesthetically, the wardrobe, everything I think is better than it is in The Wrath of Khan. But unfortunately, you know, again, it was just I couldn't connect to anything in the film, whereas it's much easier, I think, from an emotional standpoint, from a story standpoint, to connect to Wrath of Khan. They knew, I think, what people wanted. And I think it is a brilliant idea to, you know, they could have come up with a new villain, but instead they decided to go with, you know, one from the original series, and a beloved one. Yet he has all kinds of new surprises in store for us, and he is one of the greatest scene-chewing villains I think I have ever seen. I love Khan with that, you know, majestic rubber chest he has and everything. It's fantastic. I love a lot of the campy elements in the film, and of course, the most important thing of all is the conclusion, and having, you know, having the balls to be able to kill such a beloved character in the way they do. It doesn't feel like shock. It's, you know, it's completely warranted when you look at the whole story and what it represents, especially for Kirk. You know, I love that they went for that sacrifice. Now, of course, in the third one, all of that goes down the drain, but if we just look at Wrath of Khan, I think it's just a brilliant thing that they did. Yeah, I do wish it was more interesting in terms of the direction. I wish the score were better. I wish the look of everything was better. And I wish, honestly, you could combine the two. Combine the first film, the aesthetic, all the external stuff, and the story of this one. I think you'd have maybe one of the perfect Star Trek films. The Godfather 2. It extends and completes the narrative set up for the first part, creates an entire moral universe, and raises the narrative to Greek tragedy, but it's also deeper than the first part. In contrast to The Father, who wore his emotions on his sleeves, Michael is shifty, sinister, and manipulative. Everything you need to know is in his eyes, how he looks at people when they're not looking at him. He also begins to look at his family with the same reptilian suspicion with which he studies his rivals. Vito did everything for the sake of his family, laying aside the morality of his decisions. Michael needs to keep his family together through manipulation Michael's need to keep his family together through manipulation is what destroys him. Greek tragedy. You make excellent points on this, and I mean, I agree with you in terms of, you know, The Godfather 2 is an excellent film and a very, very satisfying one. It's certainly one of the best when it comes to the mainstream Hollywood sequels. But yeah, I mean, what you're saying about Michael, I think what they do with his particular arc is ingenious in the second film. I love how they decided to take his character, and then obviously there's the mirroring of, you know, we're seeing the flashbacks to his father and, you know, him when he was a young man, kind of developing into the man he would become. And, you know, the mirroring of that is so, so interesting, and it really ties the whole family dynamic together because, you know, naturally that's not as existent here because this is where Michael is starting to lose his family. Yet the ties to the father and that generational thing is so important. But yes, I think the way that they handled Michael in this is absolutely brilliant. All of his motivations, everything that he does just feels perfectly like Michael. It feels incredibly organic, and the film is really, really well made. And it's also just more ambitious from a filmmaking standpoint. There's a lot more locations and everything. I know, there's like a lot more money went into it. All of that said, I do prefer the first film, and I'm really not sure. I think more people overall maybe prefer the second one to the first one. Me, I've always preferred the first film, and I think it's just maybe a personal taste thing. I just find it to be more of a satisfying experience, and I really enjoy the arc that Michael has in that film. I love his shift from, who he was initially into kind of everything falling into place for him to become kind of the new Don, the new head of the family. All of it just feels so unexpected, and yet it's also perfect at the same time. I think it's an ingenious, slow burning kind of shift, and yeah, Al Pacino is absolutely amazing in it. And yes, of course, the familial ties and everything, all of that is established so well in that original film. And I guess when I think about The Godfather Part 2, again, all personal taste stuff, but there's a lot more of the business side of things. You've got your personal family as a mobster, and then you've got the family in terms of like the business. And there's more of the business angle of things here, which, naturally I'm just not as connected to. I'm more connected to the emotional stuff, and I found more of that maybe engaging in the first one. But both excellent films, and always interesting to debate them for sure. The Empire Strikes Back takes everything great about A New Hope and doubles down on it. Higher stakes, more character development, and a more compelling story. Yeah, and that's a very succinct way of saying it, but yeah, I don't know. I've been talking about it a lot, of course, but yeah, I mean, it really does double down on everything, but I think more than that, more than the higher stakes, more than, better character development, more compelling story, all of that, I think it's surprising in the sense that it's really kind of inverting everything. Like I said when I reviewed, the original Star Wars film, it's like one big crescendo in terms of the spectacle of it, and then Empire is a decrescendo. It goes from big spectacle, like, the battle, the Hoth battle and everything, and then it becomes more and more intimate. The first film is a slow climb to success, and then the next film is about the descent into failure. And that can be a really, really hard thing to do, and especially with Star Wars, something that's supposed to lift people's spirits. Something like Empire I could see as like, maybe we're going too far, maybe we're going too dark, but I think everything is perfectly orchestrated. It's better than it ever was. If there is anything that saves Star Wars as a franchise, it is Empire Strikes Back. If there were no Empire, I do not think that Star Wars would be nearly what it is. Maybe it would have been a classic, but it would have stopped probably at Empire Strikes Back. I do not think there would be this huge franchise. This film was the most important in terms of establishing the world and establishing the really important aspects of Star Wars that we can carry through for the rest of the trilogy and, obviously more and more films beyond that. By the end of this film, I mean, they are beaten down. Like, we're down in the locker room sort of situation. How are we going to come back from this? What is our game plan? And yet you still feel all that emotion where you just want them to succeed. And it's absolutely wonderful. I think, yeah, it is a near perfect film, and it's one of those situations. I'm so glad George Lucas didn't direct it, because it wouldn't have been nearly as good. You're surrounding yourself with the right people, the right editors, the right creative people, and miracles can happen. And that, I think, is the case with Empire Strikes Back. But yeah, so those are a few of your answers. Those are some of the more typical ones. Maybe we'll do a little bit more obscure ones at a different point. But thank you guys so much for watching. Over here you will see my patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.